Hey, welcome to the third installment of the XenTegra Citrix Networking Edition. Today, I have a couple guests with me. To help look at the SASE model and components that Citrix offers us to help complete and secure our Citrix environments. And outside of that, we can extend it to even outside the Citrix environment. But I've included today as a guest, I have Roger Galeo. He's here with us. Kaylee Teague will be joining us in about a half hour. I have Sapar is joining us. Oh, he's already on. So Dari, he's here. And then rounding out the list of guests today is Jamil Buck. So I really appreciate you guys hopping on and helping to get this podcast going. And thanks for being here. So
we're happy to be here.
Great. Thank you very much. So this is one of the newer pieces that I got really excited at the beginning of the year to talk about and kind of get to work with, and kind of went through those steps with what is this? How does it all play together? And really it can be confusing, but at the same time, it's like actually really easy, the different components that play into this to make it all happen and work and really provide that zero trust that we're looking for in securing the users even off-prem before we ever bring that traffic into our own networks. So I've been pretty familiar with the SD-WAN appliances, and I see how they kind of can play into this, but you don't necessarily have to have like a SD-WAN environment in your shop, to kind of start building out the components that are needed for the SASE journey that people are on. So with that, I'd like to dive into it a little bit, but not too technical. Like we'll keep this kind of at a high level to just chat about the different components of it, and mainly the main ones. So we're looking at what we call secure internet access is one of the main components that a lot of folks are interested in. And it really kicks off a lot of good conversations with folks, because it's really, I'll have customers come and say, I want that cloud firewall. How do I do that? And we have a couple different ways with the technologies we can offer here, but that plays into the SD-WAN a little bit, but then we have the insights and the analytics, and how do we see that that's all secured? And then you still got those apps, that are going to need that specific application firewall level protection, and then pumping that information into some kind of analytics so that we can review it and audit it and ensure that we're doing things safely. So with the team that jumped on today, a couple folks have different topics here. Some will cross over a little bit, but wanted to let Roger kind of have the floor for a few moments. Maybe he can chat a little bit about the SIA, Secure Internet Access. It's pronounced SIA. I get to sometimes get to throw that out, but for some reason I keep coming back to SIA. But SIA is I hear more and more, and then maybe chat a little bit about the SD-WAN and how that can kind of play into it, and maybe the direction that we go back and forth with it to kind of get off the ground with securing that traffic a little bit more. So what do you think about that, Roger?
So Chris, what I'd love to do is kind of back up a little bit, and I want to tell you first our story of SASE first, and then dig into each of the components. So this is the vision of SASE, right? So let's imagine you're a user and you're sitting at home, or you're sitting at Starbucks, or you're sitting in your remote office, or you're sitting at your corporate network, right? The problem is today's networks generally make the user decide how to access their applications depending on where they are. So if I'm off the network, I might turn on a VPN, or I might go to this portal. So it's a mess. And so users don't have a good experience, especially in this world of hybrid work, where we really need to give people a simpler way to work. So the vision of SASE starts like this. Let's build a platform that users can go to one place to get all of their applications, all of their desktops, all of their data, all of their workflows, all of their micro applications. And many of you know that as Citrix Workspace, but it works with a number of different ones here. But here's what we want you to think. SASE is the convergence of both intelligent traffic steering, that's known as SD-WAN, and really two security modalities. One is the zero-touch network access provided by Citrix Secure Workspace Access, and the other is SIA, or Citrix Secure Internet Access that you mentioned, Chris. So the first thing that happens when you launch an application is the system does all the magic and says, where is this user? What device are they on? What are the conditions that they're on? Have I challenged them already? Do they have a token? And all of those things go on with Secure Workspace Access that says, do I know this user? And what rights do I give them to applications and resources on my network? That's a traditional zero-touch network access. The big problem that happens then, and what a lot of companies don't have a full kind of wrapper around, is what if the application is not in the network, right? If it's in the network, it's easy because you're on private networks. You're probably looking at your east-west threats and things like that. You've probably got your big firewalls that you've really worked on in the data center. Great. But what happens when the data now immediately leaves that user's location and goes out to the internet? Well, that's why Citrix introduced Secure Internet Access. So again, Secure Workspace Access says who they are. Do they have access to applications? Secure Internet Access says, let me ensure that the payload is safe. Let me make sure that the URL they're going to is valid. Let me make sure it's not, and by the way, we're not just talking about work applications. We're talking about any web-based application that a company wants to protect their users, right? So Secure Workspace Access protects the applications and the data, and Secure Internet Access secures the user. So if you accidentally go to Facebook where one of the O's is a 0, well, we know that is a malicious URL and we'll stop it. Or if you're at a legitimate site, let's say you're on salesforce.com and some knucklehead who you just fired decided to put a malicious Word document in there. Well, because we're inspecting the content that's going through there, Secure Internet Access will protect that as well. So one leap now is there are a number of vendors that do what I just described, where they have an internet web, portal or a web gateway that secures the user payload. They all do it differently, and love to have you. I know, Chris, you and your team know our product inside now, but suffice it to say, we do it better than our competitors in a lot of different ways. Same with the ZTNA. Because a lot of customers with Citrix workloads, it just works, and it's just, it's the same vendor that you know and trust. But here's where it gets really cool. When you stitch together an SD-WAN fabric, now I talked about, hey, first thing it does is inspect where the workload, where it belongs, but the SD-WAN component now does the intelligent steering. It might be, hey, they've got a big, MPLS infrastructure, and some internet that's in the back end, right? Or just to do backup. Well, now we make it all one. And if it's voice traffic or something that's destined for the data center, of course, we'll probably use the MPLS. But if there's a problem with the MPLS, we can route traffic over the internet over a virtual path. And the reverse is true. If you're going to Workday or Salesforce.com, you're going to want to use your internet path. But if that's flaky, it will traverse the MPLS and go out the back door. The good news is with Citrix SD-WAN, we do that every packet. So we're able to give users, we give IT the confidence that regardless of the type of application it is, I'm securing entry into the network to do that. I'm then securing the things that are off my network by helping the end user, and then automatically routing users to the location that they're looking for. So the big picture here is Citrix is about how do we make computing easy? And the future of work is around, how do we simplify what a user has to do to get their jobs done?
All right, excellent. That's a big help to kind of talk about that differentiator there, the data that's already on-prem in there. And then what if the user is at home, and they're outside, how are we still pulling them in to secure? Because they don't need to establish like a VPN connection to access Salesforce. So how are we still monitoring that, even though they might not be physically or technically behind a SD-WAN appliance at that point? So it shows with your example there that we can still bring that security to folks that are on-prem and the folks that are remote. So that's an excellent example. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, Chris, you're right. I mean, we're trying to solve for a ton of if then else scenarios so the user doesn't. Right. So if they're off the network, we give them the secure internet access client that can make that connection for them. But if they're sitting behind the SD-WAN appliances, that can be done at the network level. So, but the user never has to think about it. They just connect and the system handles it all.
No, that's excellent points. So we're kind of looking and talking about like the SD-WAN and the SIA pieces. So,
Sure.
and you and I've discussed this in the past a little bit, but we can use that SD-WAN appliance on-prem to really proxy everything at the data centers, at the colos, at the DR sites and everything. We could steer that traffic using that device to the CASB service in the Citrix cloud without the agents being based on there. But for all those one-off folks that are anywhere in the world at any given time that you've just drop shipped a machine to because they had to have a Windows 10 machine, we could still secure them with greater security with the SAA clients and agents that we could run on there.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what's really exciting is some of our competitors struggle with things like Chromebooks or Linux machines where Citrix secure internet access works seamlessly with a Chromebook. So think of, a higher ed or a K through 12 where they're given, they might not need SD-WAN per se, like a remote learner might not need that, but the school has to protect those users that they've shipped out, Chromebooks. So being one of the only vendors that has this Chrome implemented SIA or secure web gateway, it's a benefit there as well. So you hit the nail on the head. It depends on the use case, right? So if somebody goes into the office all day, there's no need to put an agent on it because they're behind the infrastructure that uses it to secure the traffic.
Yep. And I think playing off of that a little bit, like I had a discussion last week, there was a Citrix team in a pretty large company, but it's one of those size companies where you're the Citrix people, you own the Citrix VDI, CVAD, remote hosted shared desktops and so forth. But they're not, in direct competition or with the network team, but they're doing their own stuff over there. So and typically that's traditionally been a little harder for us as Citrix folks to get to talk to those kind of folks on the networking team because there's walls up intentional or non-intentionally, but those barriers do exist. So what that customer was talking about, they're like, we really want to be able to showcase some future initiatives that can really take and propel IT as a whole, but more importantly, the Citrix environment to take us to the next level. How might we be able to do that? And I started going down that route a little bit of like, you could introduce this new cloud security model with the SASE approach and going through and watching the traffic with SIA. But you don't have to do that for everybody in the whole environment. You could take those little pieces it's not little, but a component of the IT infrastructure there, and we could enable that for the Citrix environment. So then it's like, look, everything else in the environment is not running through the SIA, but we have the Citrix environment running through there. So we've published a desktop, and now look at all the analytics and insight that we have to just folks that are inside of that. Do you want to be able to offer that to the rest of the infrastructure, the rest of the organization? And definitely that option is there for us. So it's very flexible, and I've seen that more and more where people get a little worried about, is this going to be intrusive? Is it going to be like a major overhaul in our environment? And it's like, no, we just sit this on the side, like out of band and just steer traffic to it.
Yeah.
And then it's very flexible.
So Chris, it's funny that you mentioned that. I'll give you an example of what we've seen some customers do. You said a whole bunch of, really, really poignant things that this is what customers are doing. So imagine this today. People that run a Citrix farm, for instance, that's sitting in their data center, generally they'll send that traffic over some private link. Maybe they have SD-WAN. But they're sending users back to the data center, and the data center has all the users there now, right? So you've concentrated the users in the data center. That's fairly secure, right? And also you'd think that there was large firewalls that they might use that do some of the same type of inspection that we're talking about, right? But I haven't talked to a CIO yet that hasn't said, I want to get out of the data center business. So as customers decide that they want to get out of the data center business, they will move things to one of the big 3 or 4 cloud providers. So let's use Azure for a moment, right? They're putting those workloads now in Azure. So moving the workload from where it sat in the data center, and now we're moving it into Azure, which is just another data center. People just forget, just because it has lots of feature and is elastic and all, it's still data center, right? So what people are doing today is they're backhauling their traffic over their MPLS, and then they're buying something called ExpressRoute that goes into the Microsoft cloud. They've just increased their cost to get an inferior performance. And then what are they going to do? Take the end user compute traffic that's now in Azure and run it back over the ExpressRoute to go out their firewalls? No, your example is perfect, Chris. Those workloads that might be sitting in Azure, we just make their default route the Citrix Secure Internet, and now they have a secured cloud-first instantiation. Now I'll do one better. If you have SD-WAN at the branches already, you simply put an SD-WAN virtual appliance in that same VPC, and then you have a direct connection from the branches that acts and looks like ExpressRoute with high speed, now high availability and resiliency. So the users from the remote branch are going directly into the cloud to Azure, running workloads there, and then going out to the secure internet access pod. So we've basically done zero heavy lifting. In fact, we may have removed some of the core components of the infrastructure because they're redundant now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That just the flexibility, like the Swiss Army knife in this portfolio. We're just pulling out the pieces that we need, and we don't have to wham bam, big bang with everything. We could pick apart and build the components that we need up at little pieces at a time. So
absolutely,
very unintrusive to the workflow of the operations.
I wanted to tee up something for some of my counterparts on the line, because I talked earlier about the workspace, where you go to the workspace first and then it makes the inspection. Is this a web app or is this a SaaS app, right? Those two things are different, right? Just because you access something from a browser doesn't mean it's SaaS. It could be internally developed. And I can tell you the other thing we're hearing a lot is when companies do these internally developed applications, and they're made available either online or, that if somebody is wanting to poke holes, trust me, they're going to be poking holes at the big guys, but the bad guys who find a service running that they can exploit, I think that's where maybe we shift the conversation to some exciting stuff that my counterparts are doing here around protecting kind of those applications that companies are making available.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's shift the conversation a little bit, because that's still a part of this conversation. So are we alluding to the CWAP as being next?
Yeah, I think that's, it's again, Citrix has not been thought of as a security company, which is a shame, because we've been securing workloads for 30 some odd years, right? It's just a different mindset. Like everybody thinks, oh, firewall, anti-malware, but blah, blah. How about the people who are attacking your application? I don't have the stats, but they're out there, that the majority of issues today and security breaches are at the application today, not at the network anymore. It's where they're trying to. So Citrix has really taken the lead in helping companies do better at securing the actual APIs and the web apps themselves.
Awesome. So that leads us into the CWAP discussion, I guess. So that's how we're going to secure those applications and take them to the next level, to kind of put them in that bubble to protect them. So
and my partner Saper here is the expert on that, so I'm sure he'll be happy to discuss that with you.
Okay, very cool. Well, thanks for being here, Saper. And this, I guess, is your platform and expertise area. Quite honestly, that's an area I haven't personally had a lot of hands-on experience with. So I am pretty sure I'm about to hear some pretty cool stuff and learn a thing or two. So thanks for being here. And I know Kaylee might hop in a few moments, but if you could talk about that a little bit, maybe let's just start off with what is it?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I think Roger kind of set the stage pretty well with kind of given you the background as why SASE even became such a big topic. And I think one of the factors is the remote workforce and the remote networks and having that control and flexibility for users to work from wherever they want. But the second element that really pushed a lot of these products is the migration of applications from Windows-based app to web-based app. Again, traditionally, a lot of these apps ran like on a virtual desktop or a published application. And we're kind of far away from that world because most of these applications are natively web-based. So now when we talk about the web-based apps, again, Roger pointed to this, that breaks into two components. Some of these web apps are SaaS that are hosted and secured and provided by a cloud provider like Salesforce, Workday, you name it. But there are still a lot of web-based applications that a lot of organizations develop in-house. They host it within their network. They have a dedicated development team to manage and build these applications. And now when you look at security, there is a component of access part of it. So we talked about secure workspace access and how that can provide that zero trust access into any type of application. But now when you look at the apps that are built in-house, that's where some additional components around security becomes more relevant. Again, Roger pointed to applications being the target for most of these attacks these days, not the network. So when you look at the network security layer from layer 1 to layer 7, your firewalls are here good to go to protect you layer 1 to 3. You check your ports, you check your IPs, you make sure the right people are coming in. But how about when that person accesses the application that you are hosting in your network, and that network could be an Azure, it could be a Amazon, or it could be your on-prem data centers. So how do we make sure that layer 4 to 7 post decryption of the application, we make sure these hackers are not trying to, again, trick my applications. If it's a finance e-commerce website, if it's a patient portal website, that patient has to go and put their name in. What if instead of putting their name in, they're just putting a SQL quote to trick their database and allow them access into a lot of records that they shouldn't be accessing.
Right.
And that's where the CWAP service comes into play to protect, again, majority of these web applications that are hosted within companies' network and are accessible over the internet. So people can access them from anywhere.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, and I take it based on what I know is that this is like the next generation of WAF. So I have customers that take credit card transactions on-prem, and they would put a Citrix ADC NetScaler in, and they'd have the WAF set up in front of it to secure some of the policies and ensure that there weren't SQL injections, you know, and help with DDoS and everything else that can come with putting any of these applications on the internet and making them publicly accessible. But explain to me maybe a little bit what's the differentiator between like the CWAP itself and not in the traditional WAF that we have, you know, because I'll hear customers say, you know, I have WAF on the NetScaler, or I have another company's web application firewall, it's rolled into it. How's the CWAP differentiate itself from those, even though it's kind of this it's similar, obviously, but there are some differentiators there. So could you speak a little bit about some of those differentiators?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a good question. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here. That, again, protection can be applied in either scenario. Some customers, they prefer to keep that device or ADC, or again, it could be an F5, it could be any type of ADC product that is doing the WAF functionality, which inherently makes sense because these devices are known to be a load balancer. So they're doing the decryption, they're doing the SSL offload. So it makes sense for them to do the SSL inspection right on that device. However, when you look at security, again, when you look at SIA product, for example, we're talking about a package of a lot of security functions that a lot of organizations in the past, they had to spend one-off money with different vendors to gain. Like we'll look at SIA, we're talking about DLP, we're talking about URL blacklisting, whitelisting, we're talking about CASB. And if you look at a lot of organizations, they may have different technologies that accomplishes this. And when you look at cloud security, one of the initiatives and goals behind it is to consolidate and bring as many of the security features in a cloud service that you don't have to worry about anymore. So you just pay one vendor and you get a package of that single tier architecture security with that. So when you look at CWAF, one advantage that CWAF as a service offers is, again, we're talking about different layers of security. It's a cloud-based solution, globally distributed. So any user from anywhere in the world that is targeting your application, trying to access your website. And again, that website could be an e-commerce website, it could be a financial portal, it could be a patient portal, again, you name it. Now, before even the traffic hits their network, they have to go through our scrubbing center, that's what we call it. And in those scrubbing centers, there's different tiers of security mechanisms that we put in place. And that tier one would be the DDoS mitigation. So as soon as the traffic hit, we will make sure that in case there's a DDoS traffic, we would just drop the traffic before even it arrives to your network. So everything is kind of air gap between CWAP scrubbing centers and your data center. The second tier is the WAF component of it. So now that we decrypted the traffic, let's look at for OWASP top 10 attacks. And now we added bot mitigation as a part of that as well. Again, bots are good and bad, and making sure, again, we know which one is trying to access your application is important. And the fourth tier of that is API protection. Again, anything that a web application requires to function, we would do that inspection at our scrubbing centers, do the decryption once, and then once the traffic is clean, we only pass clean traffic to your firewalls through a secure tunnel, and you don't need to do decryption, encryption again at your data center level, which does improve the performance of the application big time, as opposed to doing decryption, encryption on different solutions at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like what we're talking about, these cloud services. It reminds me of, I guess, as an example, it's like you live in a gated community, and these things are they're at the gate, they're not even in your neighborhood at that point. We're protecting it out on the main street, out on the highway, so that the intruder's not in your front lawn, like tapping on your front door. They got that gate is, a couple blocks down the street. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. And with that though, it's like these services, so you're in an evergreen state with multiple pops, across this country and across the world even, so that there's 1,000 times more resilient as far as the access points that we have to enter these applications. It's just really, really impressive how that's all set up. So you get all that extra stuff by using it as a service versus managing it on-prem and trying to do it yourself. I think it's really impressive.
Right on, Chris. Yeah, you pointed a couple of good things here. Again, in a comparison of an on-prem WAF solution, because that was like the first topic, how is this different? If I'm running WAF on-prem, I'm running it on my ADC. So that ADC is doing WAF. There has to be another way for me to do DDoS mitigation. A lot of the times companies pay their carriers to do that. And sometimes, again, AT&T, Verizon, or whoever is providing their circuit is offering some basic DDoS, which again, it's a tricky component because DDoS could be very sophisticated. DDoS could be as simple as like a flooding. So again, now with this model, we're consolidating their DDoS that they got from vendor X and their WAF that they got from vendor Y into a same service that again is highly resilient across the globe and has like certain SLAs to make sure we're not compromising application performance because of security.
Yeah, and we could, remove some of the components that you might have had traditionally on-prem. Like you stated, a lot of the carriers are offering that DDoS protection as a service. I would assume that's going to add a little bit more cost. I know some vendors offer like physical hardware to block that before you even get into the ADC to the WAF piece. But now you got another appliance on-prem. So it's like when you start weighing the pros and cons and the cost factors of that, it's like, well, yeah, why don't I'm going to be a lot safer if it never touches my environment. So let's just take care of it on the other side of the country or wherever they might be trying to come into my bubble that I've built here. And it's a lot of perks that come with that. But then it's pretty slick. So
from the cost saving perspective, you pointed out good things. Again, we're looking at consolidating multiple technologies. So there's definitely a cost saving factor involved. And when you look at your savings on your firewalls, a lot of, again, organizations spend a lot of money on big beefy firewalls because their firewall was supposed to protect against all these bad traffic. But now our CWAF service is doing all of that. So we're only passing you, we may receive like gigs or terabytes of traffic to our POPs, but we may only pass 100 meg to your data center because the rest of it was all bad traffic. So now you can downsize your firewall in terms of the cost savings, consolidate your ADCs, maybe make them smaller to just do load balancing and offset the security things to the cloud service. So 100%, yeah, there's definitely the cost saving factor involved with that too.
Yeah, and overall performance. And I tell you how surprising it was we did a manual bot protection with WAF on-prem with the ADCs, and it did show us some insights after 24 hours of just having those policies in place. I mean, it was over 100 different bots that were floating outside, and they were bad bots that were hammering away at the application because everything was fine in the infrastructure except for this one application, which was critical to this company's success. And these bots were just tearing it up. So now we're blocking them at that point, but it would have been even nicer if we were blocking them far away outside of the gates of our gated neighborhood community. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important to kind of show that and highlight that you know, it's taken care of before it even reaches anywhere near your infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, this is like what you guys did with your client is kind of one of the ways that we try to educate customers about the necessity of a tool like this. Again, when we look at more financial, more sophisticated organizations, they're aware, they know the need for this type of product. But again, we have smaller customers that they're not aware that, oh, do I need a WAF? Why would I have firewalls? We hear that all the time. I have checkpoints, I have Palo Altos. What is this thing doing for me? But the key factor here, again, your edge firewalls, 90% of the time are not meant to do SSL inspection. They're layer 1 to 3 products that they have a different function. And WAF and CWAP is a complementary to that. So what we worry about, what we inspect is layer 7. And 80% of the application attacks typically happen at layer 7. And a lot of the times these organizations don't know that they're getting attacked like this. And one way for us to show the value of CWAP is, again, we have conversations with customers and ask them to put one of their applications behind the service for a month and just see what we're catching. And you would be surprised the amount of traffic that they just didn't know that they were getting inside of the network. And we show them that they're all being caught by our service now.
Yeah, they're waiting outside the door there. Just
Yeah.
give them that little inch. They're going to take a mile if they can get in the door. So, I mean, this is how a lot of those issues that we've seen with the Colonial Pipeline and some of our customers even, and like you pointed out, people think that they get their firewall, then they're going to be okay. But really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're 50 user shop or 50,000 users. We're going to need the same components to protect your users because it's your data is at stake here, and it only takes one little flaw or mistake by any person or neglect of maybe not updating something to really get everything messed up pretty quickly. So pretty cool to point that out. Well, you know, how do we, with all that, with these services and components and technologies, how do we kind of wrap that all together to see the usage and maybe some of the analytics and the pieces that really come down to the factors when we're auditing and trying to do some reporting on these components that we're subscribing to? How do we kind of tie all that back to somebody who's maybe not even on at the technical level inside of IT? You know, how do we make that easy and consolidate all of that? Is there some kind of services insight portal that kind of rolls everything into one, or we kind of still have things in a few different areas?
Yeah, I think that the whole like analytics and visibility, again, becomes a very powerful tool in a story that Citrix can tell, for example. Again, there are different vendors that can provide one-off of these components of SASE that we talked about, but Citrix is probably one of the only vendors in the market that can provide the entire SD-WAN, again, at the network layer from where we break out traffic to the internet, pass it to SIA for securing that internet traffic, use secure workspace as a way to allow users to securely access the application, and use CWAF to protect your internal web application. So when you again put all these components together, you basically have a full audit trail of your applications, your users, your network. And that's where the whole Citrix analytics platform is developing to become a single analytics dashboard that pulls data from all these different services one-off. So at the moment, again, some of these products like CWAF, the analytics is separate on its own, but the goal is to kind of build all these dashboards into Citrix analytics platform that, again, provides a single access, pane of access for, again, your inbound traffic, your outbound traffic, your network layer traffic. And it does integrate with a lot of SIMs. Again, I know security people already have enough dashboards for that. They're not looking for more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've definitely heard that story before. Like, hey, how do I pump this up to my SIEM? I want all that data, and I'll let those guys parse it and format it the way that they want once I deliver it to them. But I guess at the end of the day, you're still going to log into Citrix Cloud. If you're subscribing to it, you're going to have that option to just shoot that off, and it'll open up for you. Not too many dashboards. They just what, two? I think between everything we spoke about here, you might have two for the insights of what you're looking at, maybe SD-WAN orchestrator for the management components of it, if you want to look at the up, down, and the link usage that you're paying for. So yeah, it's very manageable still at this point.
Yeah, and that could be, again, distributed across different team members. We're talking about a big portfolio of product suite, and part of it would be handled by network team, part of it would be handled by security team, and having that kind of, again, role-based access into the analytics or configuration tools is all available for different components. So that way, again, we're not offloading everything to the existing Citrix team that doesn't have anything to do with like a security gateway product, for example.
Yeah, they might just, somebody up in management might just want a screenshot of like, how much were we using those two MPLS links and that expensive legacy MPLS link, and maybe want to see that cost factor savings that they might have with the commodity ISP links at this point. Just send them a screenshot. But you can automate that stuff too, though. Can you automatically get the reports like emailed to you? I know there's some ServiceNow integration, which has been a pretty hot topic, at least inside of XenTegra. So I think it's kind of steering towards the future that's going to be a big piece. But I can envision it. It's like, hey, we had that MPLS link go down for 10 minutes, and then a ticket's automatically created for you, inside of ServiceNow, in addition to like the email that we're used to, or even a text message or something. But that seems to be evolving in the right direction. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think one of the problems we're solving here is a big problem that we all have as normal iPhone users. There's 10 different airline applications. There's 20 different Uber and Lyft. We're all overloaded by different applications and dashboards. So making that efficient is also a thing for IT folks. Again, having specific dashboards that they feel comfortable with. I have customers that ServiceNow is their tool, like for IT team. All they do is within ServiceNow tools, and they want to build in their analytics dashboard. They want to build in automation, everything through ServiceNow. And again, we've been able to provide our APIs for all these tools to not only customers can just log in and look at the dashboards, but if you want to build these dashboards elsewhere, you have the APIs and tools to do so. And again, we've had customers do that with ServiceNow, with Splunk, with, again, Logarithm, different type of solutions that are out there.
That's pretty cool. And I think it's important to note here, like everything that we're talking about, you might have had never had a Citrix virtual apps and desktops environment in your infrastructure. You might have just been a manufacturing site that relied on remote desktop services from Microsoft forever in the day. But now that your workforce is, especially the management layer and above, might start being distributed more, they're working from home and remotely, they're still, just because this is Citrix doesn't mean it doesn't fit inside of your infrastructure or your organization. We have the opportunity here to leverage a complete portfolio of this SASE journey and the components that are involved in that and bring it into an organization. And again, even if the CVAD piece, it wasn't a part of your history or your story. So I think it really opened the doors up to a lot more discussions and the capabilities that Citrix has. So it's very impressive, and it's been an exciting year so far with what we've been able to talk about and try to help secure folks in their
Chris,
organization.
you make a great point, because I think sometimes people look at Citrix SD-WAN. Let's be honest, Citrix isn't always the first name that comes to mind when you think of networking. However, Citrix has been delivering on the low bandwidth, high latency scenarios for 30 years. That's a networking function. So the other thing we want people to know is, although we do work extraordinarily well with CVAD, we also are a fantastic SD-WAN solution on its own. In fact, a large percentage of our SD-WAN customers, it's the first purchase they've made from Citrix. And we expect the same thing to happen with secure internet access, is that any customer, regardless of their history, can benefit from a Citrix SASE complete solution.
Yeah, definitely, Roger. Yeah, it's been a really cool year so far. So more than happy to talk about it with folks. And I love the demos. And this is from East Coast to West Coast. We're really pushing the conversations and really ramping up, wanting to introduce and discuss this with folks, because it's not hard. It's just, it seems overwhelming though, when it's like you Google it for a second and you're seeing like the SASE book for dummies, register here, you're going to go on this journey and it's going to take you forever. And it's like, it really isn't, it's really, we just got to do these little bits and pieces here and there and make some tweaking adjustments to how the flow of the traffic goes into place. But we don't have to come in with a forklift and like bulldoze your rack to kind of get this going. We can add that security, not only that you might want, but quite frankly, you need it. And it's not a matter of when or if, but more of when it's going to happen if you don't really start jumping on this to secure these things a little bit better. So.
And Chris, you're right. I mean, that's why I look at companies, especially XenTegra. I mean, you guys have the expertise to take a customer from, where they are today and not be overwhelmed by all the marketing speak and things. So we really appreciate what you guys do, is helping your customers kind of, separate all the noise from, hey, here's how it's going to affect your business positively.
Yeah, positively. That's that's the key word there. It's going to be better for everybody, and you're going to sleep better at night, waking up to a bunch of crazy stuff going on. I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of, keeps them up at night. But yeah, so any other components maybe that we didn't touch on? I don't want to really get into the technical details of this. I think we kind of touched on the flow of where the traffic goes and how it would leave your organization and come back into it, and maybe some of the pieces that we're doing that secure components that we're going to put into place. But is there anything maybe that we've missed that we didn't touch on, or that you guys want to add to the conversation?
I would just like everybody to, continue to work with XenTegra and look at what Citrix is doing. As I said, we're not always known as a traditional networking vendor, and we think that's good. Right? There's companies have been doing just pure route and switch for all their life, and everything looks like route and switch to them. Citrix is really taking this innovative approach to say, let's stop thinking about the network and let's start thinking about what users do and how they impact the business. And if we can put solutions in place that improve their ability to do that and improve their satisfaction doing that, then everyone's happy. And that's who Citrix always has been, but it's what our real approach to SASE is looking like. Chris, thanks.
No, thank you. Well, that was a mouthful. A very satisfied feeling that I have from this discussion, because I really, again, at the end of the day, I wanted to chat about this kind of at a high level and just get into the weeds just a little bit, because even though the weeds aren't very thick, I just wanted to chat about how easy this could be to put into an organization for folks. So I do appreciate you all being here today. This was a very good discussion, and hopefully some folks online get something out of this. So thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, definitely, Roger. Thanks, Jamel. Thanks, Savar. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Chris.
And join us for the next one. I don't quite have the topic lined up yet, but looking forward to how we're going to continue this networking edition of the Citrix podcast that XenTegra is doing. So if you're not aware of it yet, we got some events coming up this week alone on Thursday in the city of Albemarle. We're going to spend half of the day reviewing some of the demos on the topics that we just covered, and then spend the afternoon out in the woods driving some Jeeps around. But we're going to have some Topgolf events coming up end of July, August, that we're targeting Dallas for one of those, and Chicago for another Topgolf event. And then we're in the works with a more formal golf outing in Orange County, California area as well. But we're going to continue to invite you guys out and want to discuss this and show it to everybody. So the more people that get their hands on this or get in front of us to just chat about it for a little bit, the better. So we're taking a lot of efforts to do that for you. So hope everybody has a good day, and thanks again for being here, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Have a good day.